Are back, and it has been we've had dead air for about 17 minutes while we've had like a really good conversation. So you're listening to People Talk with Chris R on KYRS Medical League Spokane 88.1 and 92.3 FM, and I have
Abby Sachs with the Inland Northwest Coalition for the Inland Northwest Coalition for the Liberation of Palestine and Jewish Voice for Peace Spokane.
Thank you so much for being here. Yeah. We have been on the air for, like I said, about 17 or 18 minutes, and we've been having a really good, thoughtful conversation. So while we were doing that, I burned through some promos for now, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to have to pick back up where we left. So thank you so much to my girlfriend Amy for reaching out and letting me know you could not hear us because we didn't know.
Yeah.
These little buttons right here, when they're lit up, that means that we're on. We're live.
Or so we thought.
Or so we think. So I'm just glad that it wasn't Big Brother and it was a mishap.
Yeah.
So you can't stop us yet. So anyway, let's pick up where we left off. So tell me a little bit about sort of the organizations that you're working with right now currently.
So I have been involved with Jewish Voice for Peace Spokane and Inland Northwest Coalition for the Liberation of Palestine, or the coalition, for about a year since I moved to Spokane. They're both just great organizations. I think both have been, both started mostly after October 7th in response to the ongoing genocide happening in Gaza, and they've just attracted a great group of people to protests, and Jewish Voice for Peace especially does a lot of outreach, like the name implies, using our voices as Jewish people to speak out against what's going on. So yeah, just happy to be here today and talk more about both.
It's been 2 years.
Yeah.
2 years since this started, and it's still going.
Yeah.
And nothing has really changed other than the amount of people that have died.
Yeah. It's very frustrating to see that the horrors have been occurring for, like you said, 2 years, and now it feels like people are finally speaking up in like it's becoming more socially acceptable, for lack of a better word, for people to speak out. There are like the Democrats, the big D Democrats are finally like putting they're trying to put some sort of constraints on Israel and us providing weapons to them. And they're like the Democrats here in Spokane are finally like they're standing with Palestinian flags and they're okay with it. And it's frustrating that it's taken this long for people to find their voices and speak out against it when they felt really comfortable speaking out on a lot of other issues. But yeah, it's been horrors for 2 years, and it feels like we've made no progress, but like I said, we've made some, and hopefully we don't have to keep doing our advocacy for much longer, but it doesn't feel like that will be the case. Yeah.
I have to give credit to the Palestinian people for the amount of the effort that it's taken to sustain such a terrible, horrible tragedy, and they are still there. I mean, for how much longer, I don't know, unless somebody does something, but definitely the will of the people to stay alive this long through, all, like you said, all of the horrors, right, that we've seen, or maybe not seen sometimes on TV, right, because sometimes it's not on mainstream national TV. What we see is a lot of small insight into people who are trying to let people know what's going on there, through different social media outlets, right? The truth, like this is a child, this is a family, this is what they're going through, this is them starving right now, right? It is not just, Hamas, it is not just terror, it is just regular everyday people, children like your own.
Children, yeah. It's what we're seeing that's publicized is a fraction of what's going on, because Israel has murdered most of the journalists that were previously reporting on what's happening.
And we talked about that last week too, and it's important to remind everyone, literally, like the largest amount of journalists assassinated, right, during any type of conflict, and we can't call it conflict because remember it's genocide. It's not a conflict. There's only one side that has weapons that is actually fighting the other side, who is starving to death or is being starved out, right? But I don't know. I think there's just so much to digest when it comes to just using the right terms, right? Not just what is happening, but educating people by using the right words, But I want to go back to something that we were talking about earlier that none of you heard except me, which I thought was really interesting, and we're going to go back to it, is that fact that you had shared with me about young Jewish Americans.
Yeah, so there's the issue that you'll often hear is that Jews are largely all in support of Israel. There's not really any division in the community, and that fact is shared widely so that we can continue to fund genocide. But if you dig into the statistics, what Pew Research shows is that Jews, especially young Jews, in America are really divided on this issue. Like 42% of Jewish Americans under 35 think that Israel's response to the conflict, or Israel's response to October 7th, is unacceptable, and that 33%, I think, of all Jewish Americans think that Israel's response is unacceptable. So it's not like there's a clear-cut answer that every single Jew supports Israel. It's a really divisive issue, and again, what I said before is what I say today is not going to be representative of all anti-Zionist Jews. It's just representative of my thoughts and based on my experiences as a Jewish person. So it's a really complicated issue amongst the Jewish community. It's not something you can say like all Jews are Zionists, because that's just very clearly not the case, and the research shows that.
Well, and I definitely want to go back to sort of your experience within the Jewish community growing up and sort of what helped you change your mind and to be an independent thinker. But we'll go back to that in a little bit. I just want to talk a little bit more about also what we talked about earlier was the definition of anti-Semitism or an anti-Semite. Mm-hmm. Would you like to sort of touch on that? Yeah. I'm sorry that you have to do it again, but I appreciate you.
Yeah. So what Jewish Voice for Peace Spokane has focused a lot on is this definition, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's definition of anti-Semitism, and we focus on it because it's been weaponized quite a bit in the U.S. It was originally created by this guy, or I think maybe a few researchers, to sort of inform policy a little bit in Europe, but they never intended. One of the people who crafted it has since said he doesn't think that the way it's been being used in the U.S. is correct, and it wasn't what he intended. And the definition is of anti-Semitism, the IHRA definition is really vague, and it really it includes like 11, I think, examples of anti-Semitism. 7 of those mention Israel directly, and those definitions are incredibly vague and can easily be used to label someone as an anti-Semite, even though they're like baseless. So one of the definitions is that it's anti-Semitic to call Israel a racist endeavor. I could call like the U.S. or Australia or any other colonial project a racist endeavor, and that would be okay. But I can't call Israel that, even though it is. And then it's anti-Semitic to apply a double standard to Israel. That is so vague that it could be applied to so many different things, and you can use this definition to. Like, I could be labeled an anti-Semite under this definition, even though I am Jewish. So it doesn't really make any sense, and yet we've seen it codified into law in over 30 states in the U.S. It doesn't include Washington yet. There's been a lot of amazing advocacy over in Olympia, largely by Jewish Americans, to make sure that this definition doesn't get codified into law because it so strictly inhibits free speech. But our federal legislators are attempting to do the same thing. Put this IHRA definition into law and make it so that it's a lot harder for pro-Palestinian advocacy to happen without being stomped out by the government.
Something you touched on was the colonialism part, and mm-hmm. Israel was actually given the go by imperialist mm-hmm. and colonial Britain to occupy, right, and take
over,
Gaza and the land that is Israel now,
mm-hmm.
right, and where they were pushed into like basically the outskirts, right?
Killed and or
pushed, displaced, just like Native Americans, right? And yet they use the same tactics as a colonialist, a government, right? And we're giving like the go-to
mm-hmm.
move forward and the blessing of said government, and yet you do not have to be held by the same standards. So, like you had said, we can call those different types of governments, Australia, Britain, etc., Semitic, but we cannot call Israel. Which doesn't make any sense. It's using the same tactics. It just seems like really like confusing riddle speak to like, you know what I mean? Like just always win whatever argument that you want to start.
Yeah, and that's the dangerous thing, that it's in law now. Because now you can label,
and now it's federal law, and not federal law yet, but some states have passed those laws. Do you know which states?
I don't know all of them. It's over 30. When I was in
over 30.
When I was in school in North Carolina, I on the floor, and I went and testified on the state floor.
And, you did?
Yeah, because I had been like reached out to, and they just needed a Jewish student, so I went. And I remember one of the people who was speaking out one of the legislators who was speaking out in support of the bill was like, we shouldn't be prosecuting or we shouldn't be harming people who happen to be Jewish. And I remember that stuck with me because it sounded like the way he phrased it, it sounded like being Jewish was like some sort of affliction. Like, you happen to be Jewish. I hated his phrasing it. He was the one who was supporting it and supposed to be on my side. It's going it's spreading, especially now. More states are trying to push it.
So do you feel like you're kind of set up at that hearing?
I was frustrated because it wasn't effective, that bill still went forward. I didn't feel like I was set up. I felt like I was happy to be there and speak out against it. It's just frustrating that our legislators don't actually listen to Jewish voices, and they listen to some Jewish voices, but those don't represent the majority, and yet they're still putting these really divisive bills into law. So
let's circle back a little bit. No, that's not okay, and that's really messed up. And you've been seeing it firsthand in different states that you've been in at the time. Yeah. Also, being an activist against it, literally in court,
or in the state floor,
or on the state floor. Either way, some sort of institutional colonial room, where big decisions are made, right, that affect people's lives.
Yeah.
Sometimes forever, unless somebody can reverse those eventually. So right now, we've seen so many rights taken away from so many different marginalized groups in America. And now we're seeing it happen to Jewish people who speak out against genocide.
Yeah. Again, the definition can be used to label a Jewish person as an anti-Semite. It can be used to prosecute them. And we're seeing anti-Semitism increase post-October 7th. Israel is supposed to exist to give Jews a homeland and to make us feel safer. I feel much less safer since October 7th. Of course, this is a small problem compared to what's actually happening in Palestine, but it's just silly to say that Israel is meant to make us safer when that's most certainly not the case for me or other Jews that I know.
So now we're going to circle back. I do want to talk about sort of your experience growing up, right?
Yeah.
As a Jewish American, sort of traditions and things that you were sort of brought up with, and, what do you still, hold on to, and what are some things that you feel like you've had to sort of recreate for yourself to be who you are now and to be able to do what you're doing now?
Yeah. I am originally from the East Coast. A lot of the members of Jewish Voice for Peace here in Spokane are transplants from the East Coast, which is just representative of Spokane's demography. But I grew up with, my dad is Jewish and my mom is sort of Christian, but not really practicing. And my dad is he's an atheist Jew, which is a term that confuses a lot of people, but it's quite a common term. A lot of Jews, because it's an ethnicity and a culture in its own right, a lot of Jews will say that they're Jewish, even if they don't practice or go to temple. So my dad was sort of like that. We would celebrate the major, like the high holidays, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. We'd celebrate Passover, Hanukkah, all these things. And my dad would fast for Yom Kippur. And we were raised to be proud Jewish people. Obviously, we learned about the Holocaust, and that's a big thing when you're Jewish, is we overcame that. But it's sort of, I don't know, you're constantly taught we overcame that. Our ancestors, my ancestors my great-grandpa came from Poland post-World War I, pre-World War II, and he left Poland to go to the U.S., and the rest of his family was murdered in the Holocaust. My great-great-grandmother fled Russia, or the USSR, what is now Belarus, because of persecution against Jewish people. So we're taught Jews have been persecuted and killed for centuries, and then in Hebrew school you're taught that's why we need Israel, because if we don't have Israel, then we're going to get murdered again, like the Holocaust. And so it sort of puts us into we're not safe anywhere except in this so-called homeland. And I was in Hebrew school for a couple of years, and I was taught that, and I was taught going to Israel on birthright, which is that's a whole other thing. It's a paid vacation to Israel to propagandize and spread, instill patriotism in a country that we're not from. for Jews in the U.S. especially. So I was taught that it's like going to Israel on birthright is this amazing experience because we're going back to our homeland, and that's like the only place where we're ever going to feel safe. Thankfully, I don't know if thankfully is the right word, but I was in Hebrew school for only a couple of years, and I never really felt a strong like faith calling. So I ended up not doing it. I never had a bat mitzvah. And today I also identify like my dad as an atheist Jew. He's very Zionist, and I've kind of diverged from him in that sense and the rest of my family to be quite anti-Zionist. I don't know exactly what it was. I grew up with a really diverse friend group, and one of my really good friends was very vocally pro-Palestinian, and before that I had never really questioned the state of Israel. And then when in high school, there was one of the conflicts between Israel and Palestine before October 7th. And I remember that happened, and I was sort of like, I didn't have any opinion on Israel, and she really showed me a lot of the conflict from a new light, in a way that has never been as new. I had never seen that nuance when I was in Hebrew school or when I was talking to my grandparents or my dad about it. So since then I've really grown into someone who identifies as an anti-Zionist Jew, and I still will do a lot of the cultural traditions. I bake a lot of challah for Rosh Hashanah, and for Passover I'll bake matzah. A lot of it is around food, and I fast for Yom Kippur, and I've tried to go to temple, but here in Spokane it's really hard to go to temple knowing that all the temples here are very vocally Zionist, and I just don't feel comfortable in those spaces. So I've found my own community within Jewish Voice for Peace for people who we agree and understand that it's our obligation as Jewish people to speak out and to also find community around that, around anti-Zionism.
Would you say that traditional Jewish people are Zionists?
No, that is a made-up. One of the members of Jewish Voice for Peace is, I forget how old, but he always starts a lot of his speeches with, I'm Jew and I'm older than the state of Israel. It's a made up. Yeah, we're meant to think that we need it, even though it's existence.
That's why I wanted to ask that question. I think a lot of people are confused, right? Like, because what you just said, like most of the temples here, right, are following a Zionist type practice. Can you tell me a little bit about Zionism and, what was your first interactions with it, I guess, as a Jewish American, as a Jewish person? Yeah, I will admit I've tried to read the history of Zionism. It's a long history, but it has pretty racist origins where it's like we're going to create a homeland for Jewish people to separate them so we don't have to have them in regular society, is one of the founders. And it was, it really took hold after the Holocaust, when there were previously Jews living in Israel alongside, or what is now Israel, alongside Palestinians. At the time it was Palestine. And there were Jews and non-Jews living peacefully. And then after the Holocaust, the idea really spread that we needed to create a state specific to Jews so that something like the Holocaust couldn't happen again. And so they created Israel. Emphasis on created. It didn't exist before that. What was in the Bible is not the same as the state of Israel that we have today. That's what I find really fascinating, is that it's not history, like biblical history, what we're seeing right now. It's sort of artificial.
Yeah.
Like, where were Jewish people living before Israel existed? And where did they get the wild idea that this is where we need to be? Yeah. This is the spot.
Yeah.
And we're going to take it.
Yeah.
And they did.
Yeah.
And now, not 100 years, but 80 years later, almost 80 plus years later, they've solidified a state that is backed by the U.S. government, has weapons of mass destruction, right? Yeah. It's just pretty wild to think that place didn't exist almost 80 something years ago. And now it is a military powerhouse and is a superpower of, the modern world. Yeah. Yeah. And it's bonkers to think that that's what the Jewish faith is teaching. That the faith that we need to find support or find community in your family and love thy neighbor and all the things that, every religion
is on the same page about that same religion is not teaching, but then bomb and starve and murder your neighbor. I don't like. It
seems so hypocritical.
Yeah.
Both parties pray to the rifle.
Yeah.
So why is one any better than the other?
Yeah.
Either side has their own ideology and their own religious beliefs. I'm not really seeing too many on the Palestinian side really be able to have any kind of abilities to band together and have any sort of resistance at this point. We've seen some serious bombing and some serious backing from the U.S., right, to just demolish a people and a land, right, that they'd already had to rebuild once before.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what's most inspiring is when I was younger, I used to get inspiration from Jewish people and we've overcome so much. And at this point, it's just a lot of shame because of what our faith is or identity is being used for. And it's really just the Palestinian people where I find inspiration, seeing what they've overcome and withstood and continue to fight.
Do you feel like the work that you do and the beliefs that you have are more in line with, the Jews who've suffered, right? The Jews who suffered through the Holocaust, the Jews that really were survivors of atrocities just like the one that's happening, they would be in agreement. I think some of the last survivors of that terrible, horrible, awful time are speaking out. The ones that are still alive to be able to speak out, right? Of how this is sort of the same thing being repeated, but labeled as something else.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think it varies. There are Holocaust survivors who still support Israel, but you also see some who say, this is what I saw. This is the same thing as what happened in concentration camps. But I mean, my grandparents, they're Jewish, their families fled persecution. Now they're some of the strongest Zionists I've heard. So it just again, it doesn't make any sense that the same people who have our ancestors went through so much, now we're just able to turn that back around and do the same thing to another group of people.
And so what changed your mind was, I think experience, but also meeting people from other cultures, specifically Palestinians. Yeah.
Or just my one friend who really exposed me to the other side, I guess, she was Indian, but she just had such a strong impact on me because I had never, in college, I ended up meeting a Palestinian person. I was like, we're not I don't understand how you could be the enemy when I know you and I know what you stand for. And you, I loved this person as a friend, and I couldn't understand how, we had been pit against each other. And that's when I started to get a lot more vocal in my activism, is seeing her work and getting inspired by that to speak out a lot louder.
I find it interesting. It's that age-old tale of segregation and racism, and the two children somehow come across each other, right? Playing in the woods.
Yeah.
And they don't really know so much of the indoctrination yet, right? As the adults have tried to force upon them. Yeah. They're still innocent children, right? And that's not what I'm saying you were, but I'm saying it's almost like that childlike innocence of I was just friends with this person, and I was just spending time with this person, and I really enjoyed their company, and I didn't really care who they were or what they were. Yeah. I'm happy that they were proud of who they were, like you are proud of who you are. But it's just the innocence, right, is gone, right, in this situation, right? They're, like I said, you see pictures of innocent children, dead, right, bombed. And it really hits home, when you're a parent in America, right? That could be my child. That could be anyone's child, right? And I think that's what really resonates with me, is just the human experience, human suffering. And that in the end, I don't see anyone as being any different from me, because life is not easy, right? We are all going to die. So why should we oppress one another?
Yeah.
What's the point?
Yeah.
Because a book that was supposedly written by someone else that was supposedly somehow better than me is telling me that this is the way I'm supposed to live my life, and this is who I'm supposed to hate.
Mm-hmm. It's, I'll get into a lot of arguments with my mom about this, who's a Catholic, but she's very, very Zionist. And she'll say oh, but you're Jewish, and where if like Israel, what about October 7th? And I'm like, it just doesn't make sense, because why should our liberation come at the expense of other people's oppression? I remember someone once said that to me, and it's just rung so true. Like, I don't understand why it would make no fight for freedom has been won. But
Israel was already liberated. People were murdered, and that's not okay. And I'm sorry for those that passed and that are dead, right? On the Israeli side, right? That was a music festival. So like, we'll never know what the true, intent was behind what happened. And it wasn't, human life, all human life has value. Yeah. But it could have ended there, right? And had a peaceful resolution for the most part. And it had some compassion and figured out, how can we make this happen without, 100% going off the deep end, right? And trying to eradicate an entire nation who had nothing to do with 15 armed people, or men specifically, that attacked a music festival. How are we supposed to judge an entire country and an entire nation on 15 people? I don't know how many people were there. I'm making that number up, but I'm just, from what I've seen in the videos and everything, it doesn't seem like it was a large, like, sort of group, right, that wanted to make that attack happen. It was a small, isolated group, and I still am not sure who it was. I mean, what does the media say that it was?
They say it was Hamas, people were murdered. The level of response that Israel has executed has been disproportionate.
To what happened that day?
Yeah, it's I can't remember. I think 1,500 people were killed, which you'll often hear is the largest number of Jews killed since the Holocaust. 600,000, I think, is the number that's come out for how many Palestinians have been killed. So
that is insane.
That's just doesn't make any. It's mind-boggling.
If Gaza was like anywhere near like the size of a state in the U.S., what would that be?
600. Oh, I'm bigger than Wyoming, because
really,
right?
I don't know. I'm having a hard time visualizing.
I don't know.
I want to kind of like give people like sort of a ballpark of what it would look like if this was like a state in the U.S.
I mean, this Spokane is 500,000.
Yeah. So
Spokane metro area.
A little over the population of Spokane has been killed.
Yeah.
I mean, just digest that for a second. This entire city and the surrounding areas would be gone.
Yeah.
And that's like really effed up, man. That's like really hard thing for me to like digest. That's a really hard thing for me to like wrap my mind around.
Yeah.
This is how many people have been killed.
Yeah. And the cities that they've built, the university, there's not a single university left in Gaza. You'll hear those numbers. Like this, it's gonna be, if we can get through this, the Palestinian people can get through this, like, it's gonna be incredibly difficult, almost basically impossible to rebuild their civilization, their society from that.
That was the intent.
Yeah, which is what the government is trying to do.
But sort of circling back to what my initial thought was, is like Israel already won.
Yeah.
They have the backing of the world's most powerful nations. They have weapons of mass destruction, right?
Yeah.
They have nuclear power, right? They have all these things, right? That Gaza Palestinians don't. So even after those people were murdered, right? It didn't matter. They were still had the upper hand on Gaza and Palestinians. So what is the point? What is this like the biggest temper tantrum we've ever seen from a people and from a specific minister, right? Like against, being sort of given the green light to openly exterminate individuals that they saw as less than, right? Yeah. Less than second class citizens, like nothing, right?
Yeah. I mean, at this point, it's blatantly a land grab. There have been negotiations where they would have returned the hostages, and Netanyahu hasn't agreed to those. And there are families of hostages who have spoken out and said that they are like, they hate the way that Netanyahu, this war isn't being fought for them at this point, because if it was, it would have been over.
I thought it was really peculiar that, Benjamin Netanyahu said that he knows suffering. His son has had to reschedule his wedding twice because of the conflict, quote unquote, or the genocide that is happening in Gaza, right? He knows suffering, and he wants you to know that. He just wants you to know, I understand.
Yeah.
I know what it feels like to hurt, guys. We had to cancel his wedding 2 times. I'm so sad. I don't care.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is the most off the mark, inhuman response that you could possibly, from the bourgeoisie, that you could possibly ever. It's so predictable that they are so out of touch with reality and out of touch with what it's like to be an average person, an average citizen, an average Gazan.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and the Israeli people even are in support of Netanyahu at this point. Like you'll see protests that are happening. You'll see Israeli people who are getting drafted for the IDF, and they will burn their draft cards, just like what happened in Vietnam. It's not, people are seeing what's happening now, and they don't want to keep going with it.
So tell me what keeps you going. Tell me the things that we can do. We're going to switch. We're going to pivot, right? Because I know that we've talked a lot about, sort of the doom and gloom, right? And what's happening in the 2 years. And it's important to sort of recount those things for those that may have forgotten or have become fatigued by the media and by the way that this, genocide has been portrayed in Western media, right? Mm-hmm. People are tired, but it still matters and people are still dying. Mm-hmm. So in what ways have you been able to, sort of motivate yourself, right? And really like push yourself to continue to advocate?
Well, I mean, the big thing is the fight isn't over, because if we stop fighting, then we're just letting the Palestinian cause, the Palestinian people go and let them down. The community I found within that advocacy has kept me going. Our events, our meetings, the other Jewish people I've met who've been fighting this fight since they were teens, since Vietnam, the veterans who are veterans for peace, like people have been doing this for much longer than I have, and seeing them, talking to them, getting inspiration from them, and then finding community within that has kept me going. Because if we have community, if we don't have community, if we don't have people to draw from, then you're going to get burnt out and tired, and then you're of no use to anyone. So just the people around me, and yeah.
And so many people push for open discourse in America at this point in time, and how, we should be able to talk about things. Yeah. I agree. Also, though, it takes a certain challenge within yourself to take yourself out of your comfort zone, out of whatever bubble you may live in, and to go to one of those meetings.
Yeah.
And to meet someone who's of another color or of a different ethnicity, right? So that you can meet someone, your fellow human, and have an actual person to talk to, rather than to judge a people without ever even speaking to one, or ever even making the attempt to befriend one. And I mean all peoples. Yeah. This is how people get sucked into ideologies that are, so centered around, nationalism.
Yeah. And
fear.
Yeah.
Stay in your bubble. Stay with us. Because if you go and you talk to them, right, you're going to die.
Get brainwashed,
You're going to get brainwashed, or you're going to die. And instead, we find that we're enlightened. And that travel, right, is like, what was Mark Twain's quote, right? It was like travel is like the enemy of prejudice, and that's the truth. It's just a lot of people get stuck in Alabama, Arkansas. I don't know, what is that song? I feel like I'm singing.
I think it is.
I feel like I'm singing. What's that?
I think it's home.
I'm sorry. Whatever that popular band was that played at the Gorge this summer. But it's just like when you get sucked into these microcosmos where you never leave, and you stay in your trailer, and you drink your not Miller Lite, your I guess Coors, or your Busch Light. You're never going to look past. And I had this conversation last week. How do you reach? This is my question that I didn't get to ask them last week. I'm going to ask it to you.
Lord.
How do you ask? The white supremacist and Jerkwater USA, shine, like freaking cleaning his guns, and eating drinking a banquet and popping a banquet dinner, a frozen banquet dinner in the microwave while watching Fox News and or being on Telegram and everything else. How do you reach that person? How do you reach that person? How do you tell them, like, I actually do want to talk to you. Like, I'm not scared to talk to you. I do want to talk to you and have some sort of open dialogue. How do you reach those people?
I lived in upstate New York before I moved here, and you'll meet a lot of folks like that. I worked in a bar, and I'd have people come in, and I knew that we wouldn't agree on politics, and I knew that like people in that area flew Confederate flags, and since then some of them are flying Israeli flags below their American flags, and
the Confederate flag.
Yeah, and
they're all just flagged out.
Yeah, it's and don't tread on me, all that, and so like I've lived in community with people like that, and I don't have an answer how to reach them, but you kind of first have to like befriend them and meet them as people, and then you can go from there and find some sort of commonality find a common ground, knowing that I guess like you know them as a person before you know their politics. And I don't know, I feel like I should just add a massive, I don't know what the word is, but just like I'm aware that that's a really privileged thing to be able to go into those things and be like, I know that they respect me more because I'm white, and they like I feel a lot safer going into situations like that when I've heard of other horrific situations of people of color in upstate New York. But yeah, I think you have to talk to people like people first, but to a certain, I don't know, I'm also of the belief like if someone's a racist, then they're just not really worth your time at a certain level. And that's like, I don't know, it's the same, like I've been really involved with climate activism, and what you'll hear is like, it's not worth trying to convince the climate deniers that climate change is real. There's a lot more people who are more middle of the road that we should be trying to convince. And I feel like that's the case with this conflict. There's just a lot of Americans who aren't aware of the level of tragedy, and that's who we should be focusing on, not the people who are like vehemently defending Israel.
What do you think's kept people like middle of the road?
I think a lot of it's just blissful ignorance. They're choosing. So many people don't want to read the news.
No. I'm gonna keep my head in the sand.
Yeah.
I'm gonna drink my Monster Energy drink.
Yeah.
I'm gonna play my video games. I'm gonna
scroll TikTok.
Yeah, I'm gonna scroll TikTok, and I'm gonna be spoon fed whatever's the latest show on TV.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna watch it, and then I'm gonna talk about it with my coworkers tomorrow. And I'm never gonna touch on anything that's happening in the world that has any sort of impact or significance in my life, because I'm too afraid to ever embrace it long enough to feel discomfort.
Yeah. I think people just don't want to feel uncomfortable, because especially now.
Well, who does? But at the same time.
You have to. And especially now, it's like people don't want to know that, like, to acknowledge that for the past 2 years they've been okay with a genocide happening. Like, that's a crazy realization to have to come about yourself.
You have been complicit in the eradication and the extermination of a people who did not deserve that.
Yeah. So,
right?
Yeah, it's an uncomfortable realization. So it's a lot easier to just keep your head in the sand and ignore it.
But I agree. America's a large place.
Yeah.
It's a very big, large. It's a large place with a lot of different types of subcultures within it.
Yeah.
And I think, like you said, I think a majority of them are middle of the road, sort of blissfully ignorant individuals. You know, it's not like that they couldn't care, or that they're finding out about these things, or if they have access to information, they willfully don't want to hear it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a bitter pill to swallow, you know?
Yeah.
But reach the people that you can reach, right? Connect with the people that you can connect with.
Yeah.
Continue to build community, continue to organize, right? And strengthen what you have, right? And let it grow.
Yeah.
And those that want to come to you will. And those that want to be a part of things that are happening will. Yeah. And maybe someday one of those people, right, will come your way, right? And I don't know, have some sort of realization or epiphany.
And that's happened. I remember of Jewish Voice for Peace said that someone who they had previously had been so pro-Israel went to them, and they said, "I'm like, this is a genocide." It's someone from the temple that this member had used to go to, and they said like this, you were right, it's a genocide, and it's frustrating that it took 2 years, but people are starting to realize like things have gone so bad that even people who were previously very Zionist are starting to realize like, oh, I was complicit, and at least I guess they've made the realization at this point. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to take a quick break, and you're listening to KYRS Medical Lake Spokane 88.1 and 92.3 FM. And we're going to go just a little bit over the 9 o'clock hour for about 10 more minutes. I want to give you a little bit of time we lost. And I'd like for you to be able to say anything that you feel like you'd like to say, at that point. Would you like to do that?
Sure.
Okay, cool. Well, we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be right back.